Hey, good morning, everyone. You welcome to World Bible School Media. This is Dr. Bill, and you are watching As He Is, So Are We. And I've got a second voice here. There we go. And we're glad to have you today. Good to see Greg Parker joining us and others who are already chiming in, and we appreciate you so very much. I want to say that we are streaming both live to Facebook and to YouTube simultaneously, so you can catch us in both places. And be sure to click like and share. So I want to say that each week on this broadcast, we bring you teachings or concepts which are beyond what is often considered normal in Christian conversation, so that we can discover more of the eternal Christ who is within us, even from before the foundation of the universe. Today, back with me is my guest, Apostle Brian Christian. I have a link here that I'm going to post that I couldn't access last week, but for his book, The Everlasting Christ, and it's available on Amazon.com. I'll share that while he is talking to you a moment. But Apostle Brian, welcome to the show this morning. I'm so happy to have you back.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here, Bishop, and I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about today because I truly believe it's life-changing and will enable people to enter a place of rest and embrace, which is really the key, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, to not sound critical, and not my intention to at all to edit this video now or watching it later on YouTube as it goes into the archives there of World Bible School Media. But unfortunately, we want to bring people into rest, but that's where a lot of people fail to operate from, is from rest, and that's why there's so much stress and tension within people's bodies. When we talk about the different chakras and the
Yeah.
different energy levels that get interrupted because we simply don't operate in the I'll just say the guidelines that Father has provided for us.
Yes.
God never intended for us to live in stress. If you remember right, in Genesis chapter 2, the first two or three verses, it says that God he entered into rest. He ceased from all his labors that his
Yes.
hands had done. And I believe that was the moment in time when God handed the baton to his creation. And
Yep.
the idea was that we were to follow the example. Hebrews tells us that we're to follow his example of rest and not sweat over this life we're living, even as we entered into this human experience. And
Yes.
so we're talking about infinite in finite. And last time, Apostle Brian, we ended with the statement. I wanted to go back here that faith operates in the 3D, but knowing operates in 5D. You want to explain that to everybody so that they can see what we're talking about?
Well, I always like to open up with the statement, I don't believe I have a family. I know I have a family. And again, there are definitely levels of faith. And I think, we can do a play on words here and it can become misunderstood. So I'm not
Hmm.
nullifying faith. I think many a times where we're at in our journey as mankind is that we think faith is believing for something to happen, standing and waiting for it to come to us. And that's actually doubt because you're not a witness to the thing that you're claiming. Okay. And so it's still invisible to us. But but when you're in a place of knowing, you already believe you are the very thing you're seeking. So a lot of times what we do is we separate what God does to what God
Hmm.
has. And
Hmm.
so, God give me grace. Well, he is grace. God, give me love. Well, he is love. And so once we realize he is everything he has, we are no longer trying to embrace what he can give, but we embrace who he is. And that embrace
Right.
is also connected with who we are, because on another side, everything God has is us. And in us is the manifestation of grace, mercy, love, because the fullness of the Godhead was in bodily form. And Jesus did not separate himself as the head honcho, only I'm the one that has this. He presented everyone. He says, just as the Father sent me, I send you. Whoever sends you, forgive. Whoever receives you receives me. So we all are him in that manifestation of the Christ. And he's the firstborn among, not above, not below, among many brethren. And that word among means from within them. And so out of mankind came the Christ, manifested as a man, Jesus, as an example of who we've always been. And I think that once we understand that we are not obtaining anything in this life, we are simply unveiling that which is within us, we move from that faith realm of trying to reach out to bearing witness to the truth, which is that knowing. And that's the 5D. So it's not some spooky mystical thing. Oh man, we're getting ready to be launched into outer space, into some other dimension just floating around. I truly believe that many of us are already upgrading to a 5D perspective because we've gotten a revelation of our journey in the earth, and we're getting a revelation of the heavens, and
Right.
and the eternal sound and the eternal memory of God. And it's starting to come into alignment so that we can enter into that place of rest and actually begin to labor from a place of partnership rather than from a place of striving to obtain or measure up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. From a place of partnership, and people really, that's a word, especially the Greek word koinonia, but there's koinonos that really lays this out, and there's a lot of things in there that people need to see. Now, I want to make a statement that is going to be so contradictory to a lot of things that we, over the as a Christian nation, let's say, have strived for, and that's faith. For me, faith seems to be a striving, as in a state of to gain or achieve something, and you just spoke about that. But here's the deal: when we're striving, we're not in rest, and we've had that old thing about grab hold of the horns of the altar and pray and believe, and I'm not against praying and believing. I still believe in praying, and I'm into believing, but there's a difference when you're believing from rest. You're just trusting that what Father said and established in eternity past is still a fact, and I live in the rest of that, the peace of that, instead of this labor-intensive, oh God, you got to do something, and my needs are not met, and I've got this mess. The difference is for me that if God says you're whole, then you're whole. If God says you're blessed, then you're blessed, not because of some demand of the law that you either obeyed or fell short of, and not even New Testament stuff where it seems to be this pressure something. And of course, the New Testament is really mostly about the authoritative Pharisees and the Roman government that really put pressure on a people. That's mostly what that's about. And of course, every New Testament writing was pretty much based on what they saw in the Old Testament concerning the law. So faith really has become, for the Christian concept, has become a striving. And I gave this scripture, and I'll just share this real quickly in Hebrews chapter 11, which I know this is one of our go-to scriptures as far as faith is concerned, but Hebrews 11:1, verse in the Passion Translation. Now, faith brings our hopes into reality and becomes the foundation needed to acquire the things we long for. It is all the evidence required to prove what is still unseen. Now, let me say this about faith before I take this scripture down. Faith brings our hopes into reality. Here's the thing about faith. Faith is a word that we have misdefined and have really failed to understand. The word faith actually means that which you're persuaded of. So I can be persuaded and be in rest. I'm in rest because I am persuaded. I am confident that there's a thing. Peter describes this well. He says that all things that pertain to life and godliness have been given to us through the knowledge of Him. So I have the all things based on knowledge. But what is that knowledge? Well, I think knowledge doesn't begin in Matthew 1 verse 1. I think knowledge begins in pre-Genesis 1:1, and that's all the knowledge of the eternal Christ that says God has done a thing. He has implanted within me all things. So the all things that I think I need, I have. It's just a matter of being in rest and manifesting those things. So You know, you said you just said this at the beginning of the show, and I want to go back to this. You said for you, you said I don't believe I have a family. I know I do. I know I have a family.
Yes.
Do you know it's really this simple? You can say, I know I have a family, but how can we ignore the fact that all that Father created in eternity past in you as his creation? Do you know that as well? Or is that something you believe to have? And, you know, one of the things I'm teaching other nations of people, Apostle, is this, is that you say you're poor, you say you're impoverished, and I know you're looking in the natural realm, often, honestly, from a 1D perspective, you're just seeing the one aspect and not focusing. You're preaching a message, okay, but your message doesn't line up to what you're professing as. You know, here I'm living in this state of unrest, and I try to teach them, you know, God said you're blessed. If you look in Genesis 1 verse, I think it's around verse 28 or 29, God created his creation. He gives them dominion over all the works of his hands, and then he turns around and he calls them blessed. Now, you can define that word. You can try to take one and divide it and subdivide it and subdivide it, but ultimately one is a whole number. It's the way it is. It's the perspective that you can choose to look through or ignore. And I choose to look through it. And God called his people blessed. Now that's the creation. And so I try to teach people that who you are is what God says you are, in spite of what your current physical condition or surroundings might be. But, you know, this is such an important aspect, just believing what God said. And isn't it really true? It's a matter of the perspective or the lens you're looking through.
Oh yeah, big time. It is all based in the lens. I mean, when we base faith in a physical world and we think as as matter, we're going to change matter, it will never happen. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of Christianity today and other religions as well, where and nothing wrong with placebo effects, methodology, symbols, traditions, nothing wrong with that. But many a times it becomes, we get stuck in this mold in which, you know, we have faith to try to get something, but we don't know we are everything we're trying to get. And so, but you can't get that from a time, space, or matter concept, because
Mhm.
matter cannot change matter. We have to get beyond the illusion of matter. And I think what it is there's a difference between visible and there's a different visible compared to physical. So we've taken ourselves as physical beings rather than visible beings. And the moment you go to physical, you become time, space, and matter. And now you're dragging yourself through time, space, and matter to obtain what seems to be at a distance through that 3D perception of
Mhm.
separation. I mean, in the 3D, I see you as an individual. In the
Mhm.
5D, you are a reflection of me. Now we're starting to move into that. I'm looking from the inside, and everybody around me and everything around me is my mind being projected. It's an internal dialogue being projected as an external world. And I think the more we come into that concept, the more we will join back together what we would consider to be the visible and the invisible, or the infinite and the finite, as one, rather than as this separate thing that we're trying to get as being just matter. So matter can't inherit the kingdom of God. That's why it says flesh and blood can't inherit it. It has nothing to do with somebody's attitude or actions in their flesh, because we're
Mhm.
already all in. Okay. So
Mhm.
when flesh and blood can't inherit, it's saying that, look, you're not going to be able to put on the inheritance of God from a place of a 3D reality as physical matter. We are what? At a subatomic level, we are strings of light. And according to what a lot of neuroscience and quantum science speaks of, is that the only reason we're manifesting as matter is because of the interpretation of our environment. And so our
Mhm.
mind and the lenses is interpreting our current state. And so we are now experiencing flesh and blood but that's not the place of inheritance. The place of inheritance is spirit, and spirit is more than the definition of spirit. There's going to be a lot of redefining of words, and there has been, but even more so, that spirit really speaks of being energy and frequency. That is, and when we think of energy, again, we've got to let go of that definition of, well, the lights are on in my house. That electricity isn't a living being. But we remember we're experiencing at this level the bleeding through of eternal truths and knowings manifesting as parables, as power plants, as cable lines. But what we're seeing is harnessed power in a direction for a purpose. And if we can begin to see spirit as being harnessed through visibility for a purpose, now we're not entangled with the visibility as time, space, and matter, and we're able to move more fluid even through our visible manifestation.
Let me put something up on the screen, and I'll try to put, I don't know if I'm going to be able to put that there, so I'll have to screen share to Facebook, and hopefully, let's see how this comes up on Facebook. Yeah, okay. So it's actually just showing my words. So
Can't scroll on it,
no, I can't move that. So, but what I can do is I can pull up the photograph. But anyway, the point is I was going to have you walk through the 1 through 5D perspectives, just so people could see and understand what they are. But yeah, I don't guess I'm going to be able to do that.
oh man. Well, I can let me see if I don't know if I can pull anything up in front of me. I tend to get the first couple ones confused, but you'll get the point, whether it's frontwards, backwards, left, or right. But I can run through just a basic. So basically, the first 3 dimensions are made up of you being able to move forwards, backwards, left, right, and above and beneath. And so you can jump and you can land. Okay, you can fly in a plane, and you can walk on the ground. Okay, so we can go up and down. We can experience up and down in multiple ways in our space, time, and matter simulation. Okay. You know, and so, but it doesn't start out that way. Like if you're one dimensional, it's pretty much a flat view of life. It's kind of like just a dot, almost like when you observe an atom, it goes from a swirly, you know, cloudy mass into a solid black dot that doesn't move. Okay. And so observation is really what we're dealing with here, in the way in which we perceive. And so on a 1 dimension, I'm pretty sure you can only go, yep, it's a line. There we go. It's the 0 dimension contains a dot, nothing more but a pure information. And that's really how we view an atom through the eyes of space, time, and matter. And so you might see pictures of outer space and you might be saying, well, that's our planet. That's Mars, that's Jupiter. They're uninhabited, they're dead planets, but realize you're observing that and it has changed. Okay. Because when you observe the very base of your being under whether it be a vibrational, an MRI vibrational machine, or whether it be through, you know, some sort of high-powered microscope, all the tests show when they do the quantum tests of it's called the slit test, which is where they have waves, protons going through these 2 slits and hitting a wall behind it. There will be a perfect line when it's being observed. It will hit and create 2 lines. Okay. But when they turn away and don't observe it, it becomes a wave. It turns back into a wave. And so who we are is a wave. But the moment we observe the universe through a 3D perspective, as in space, time, and matter. It simply is the zero dimension, or a dot. Okay, so very much close to the way we would observe an atom. Is it changes in the observation, and so we're limited. So our experience is not experiencing what it's really doing. Okay, your first dimension is a line. Okay, and it's just basically a flat line, and you're usually dealing with, you can go left and you can go right, but you can't go forwards or backwards or up or down. Okay.
Right.
Second dimension is, again, well, I haven't seen this particular diagram. It will take if we take infinite lines, the result is I think this is piano. Okay. And that makes sense. I'm going to go from it a little bit different because I haven't seen this one before. But basically, you're able to go frontwards and backwards. While first dimension, left and right, the second dimension is going to be forwards, forwards and backwards. Okay. And then the 3D is dealing with up, down, front, back, forwards, and backwards. But if you notice, on a 3D, you have one aspect, like if that you cannot see. Okay. And that's the bottom of it. If you notice, you can see the sides and you can see the top, but you can't see the back or the bottom. So there is realities hidden from you in the third dimension. And you also cannot see what is within many a times, which is where we get the fourth. We see this in, what is it? I want to say it's in either Ephesians. I think it's in Ephesians, where it says, you shall know the love of Christ, the length, the width, the depth, and the height. So you have length, width, and height as a 3D. And of course, you have first dimension is length, second dimension is width, third dimension is length, width, and height. And then you have depth in the fourth dimension. Now, the fourth dimension is basically dealing with, and I know there's so many different sides of this. I'm going to take one side that maybe many are not too familiar with. And we tend to take the fourth dimension as the dimension of time, or the concept of time, okay, based on quantum. Okay, some take it as a mystical place. Now, I want to kind of combine that, because the fourth dimension from a third dimension is the delay of time. So when I'm looking through the egoic mind and through duality, time for me is something that I can't control, something I can't redeem, something that I'm kind of got to hurry through and strive, or I'm going to have regret, I'm going to have delay, I'm going to miss my moment. And so we're viewing that again through a limited perspective, almost like the atom that is appearing as a black dot, when in reality it's a cloud of witness that's just swirling and swirling around. And so, if you look at I've been seeing these pictures on TikTok. I wish I had one to share, but it's a star. Okay, they're showing stars really up close. Now, the way we see them is they just look solid stars. They just look like stars. Okay,
right.
But when you get a close up of them, they are blinking, flashing, and changing shape that look just like your atoms or subatomic particles. Okay,
Wow.
So what are you actually experiencing? You're experiencing that which is within you being projected out of you in a view. And so the fourth dimension, being the dimension of time, gives off the appearance of linear time to space-time and matter beings, or that which is that particular lens. But what it really is it's Metatron's cube. That's what it really is. And if you know anything about Metatron and some of the writings of Enoch, Metatron just simply represents the Elohim outside of the conclusion of flesh and blood visibility. And it's really the frequencies, or the sacred geometry, which is all the timelines of the dimensions that are formed together as the sacred geometry. Okay. And even the Jews have that in the Kabbalah as well. So it's not anything that people would think, oh, that's New Age. Not at all. It's Now Age.
Right.
That's what we're stepping into. And so the fourth dimension to me is the shadow of Metatron's cube. So it's the shadow of time. that we are thinking is time. But from a fifth dimensional perspective, it is our shadow reaching for our three-dimensional self and pulling us over. And that would be what we encounter every time we get a glimpse of who we are in the spirit. Get, you know, the invitation to go higher, the deeper things that's calling us. That's actually you that you would think is prophecy, or you in the future, from a three-dimensional perspective of you trying to fulfill what you're called to be. But in reality, it is actually you in the future, because there is no time, space, or matter, pulling you out of linear time and into redeemed time. And redeemed time, from 5D looking back through 4D, is not linear. It is a tool of time, which is the ability to interact, journey, grab the moment, and express, which the infinite cannot contain. The infinite cannot zero in on in and of itself without these dimensions, or different types of timelines that aren't based necessarily in linear time, but are based in the tool of time, or redeemed time. And so only really the third density takes it as linear time. And so I don't know if, hopefully you guys kind of caught, that's my drift on some of these different dimensions. Now, all of the dimensions are actually operating within the mind. They are not, there is no space or time. So you're not traveling to a dimension, just like light actually doesn't travel like we think it does. Light is very similar to, how can I put it? Almost like a strip of LED lights you would put around your room.
Right.
Okay. It looks like it's traveled all the way around your room, but it's actually individual blinkings of the same light that's in multiple perspectives of itself, that appears to be light speed, but it's actually the Elohim, the many as the one, in a vibrational interaction that never moves, but constantly looks like it's shooting all directions. And so this really helps to kind of describe how we are actually operating, that you're everywhere, you're nowhere, and you're right here all at the same time, the God who was, is, and is to come. And so, yeah.
Okay, so this picture is not a very good picture. This was the best one I could find on the spot of a star up close, showing particles and
Yes.
showing energy and the atoms that would relate to who we are. But when we move from this 5D perspective, there is as we look at that and we relate it to the 5D consciousness.
Yes.
I have this picture here. It's not level, but that's the way it came, and it was the best I could do.
Great.
So this is really, if I can get it up there, there we go. This was really the best picture of a 5D consciousness that I could come up with.
Very
And
good.
so when we talk about the 5D perspective or 5D dimensions, which D is for dimensions, how does that transition into 5D consciousness?
Well, what's happening here is the 5D takes everything that you thought was external and makes it all you internal. So everything is you. Okay. And that's really what oneness is. So 5D is the realm in which oneness seems to be the centerpiece. And what it's doing is, and you can see even in this picture, you'll see this network that appears around you, or the vibration of you.
Right.
And then you have you inside of you, and it goes on and on and on. And it really does begin to break open a multi-dimensional state, almost very similar. I mean, if I was to use a simple analogy here, because I know this stuff can get deep, is let's look at just your biology for a minute and relate it to this. Your biology, the way your cells operate, are under a different law than the way your organs operate, and the way your organs operate are under a different law than the way your skin, what your skin needs. So each level of you has different needs, different laws, different different responses that keeps it all moving together. Okay. And so you are a multi-dimensional being just at a biological level when it comes to the laws of the spirit and how those laws interact. And so if you can
Okay.
kind of parallel that to how we are in a 5D, the 5D, now here's the thing I want people to understand. The 5D doesn't mean you're going to necessarily die, because when you do transition from the 3D, it can appear to those in the 3D that you died. Okay. And so there is that side of it too. All right. So realizing that since there is no death, what are we experiencing? Well, we're experiencing the program of space, time, and matter, and the interpretation of that program based in our limited experience, which is really much of it an illusion. And so we're watching somebody have a heart attack. They hold their chest, they hit the ground. Next thing you know, there's a funeral, they're buried, they're gone.
Right.
But from the flip side of that, they simply came out of the matrix and their perception of the matrix, and they simply cannot be seen through the 3D anymore. Now,
Right.
what's also amazing in this is when people transition from this life, they don't go somewhere. There's nowhere to go. There's no space, time, or matter. We are made up of what? I think the stat is what 0.1% matter.
Hmm.
And so we don't really have any matter. The matter is that real tiny, less than 1% is simply what we're experiencing of a mirrored reflection of the true, which again has no time, space, or matter. And so what we're experiencing here is, as 5D beings that, let's say they've transitioned, they're living out a 3D, 5D experience. So they're not invisible to themselves, and they are experiencing a glorified 3D, which is what we would call the new heavens and the new earth. And the new heavens and new earth is not some event coming. It's more of a consciousness awakening. And I can say that how many people, if you were to line up every denomination of the church and every religion, just one representative in a room, what would you have? You would have a multi-dimensional state. You would have many worlds represented there based on the way in which they perceive their life, their culture, their journey, their spirituality. And so we are all
Right.
operating in different worlds. And the key here is realizing we're not called to change the world, we're called to change worlds. In other words, to continue to transition within our world into new worlds of experience, which is how we live in more of a motion, fluid state, where we're not actually rooted in a 3D dimension like Star Trek, and we're now going through a wormhole. Those wormholes are actually in your atoms and subatomic particles. You are strings of light. Those are the wormholes of the interdimensional state. So you have in your DNA the stacking of dimensions. You have it all within the mind. And 5D to me is the place of oneness. It's the place of frequency. It's the place where you're living as a sound. You're as Einstein would put it, you are a bundle of frequencies in a beautiful biochemical suit. And that suit is the vibration that you're experiencing. And so 5D simply brings you into oneness. It brings you into the realization that nothing can harm you, that there is no enemy, that everybody around you represents parts of you that you're integrating, and you don't stop in 5D. You're still growing. It's not an arrival place. It's just a specific realm of realization that allows you to live out the echo of your human experience without linear time. So for instance, I'll give you an example of my 5D realm. My 5D experience is basically I can tap into my history at any place in linear time, and I can change it. Okay. I can get a whole new understanding of it. We do this called shift. right? We go in and we change people's trauma and help them to see the real truth of what was going on there, Father's perspective. Now, when that happens, it changes their whole present paradigm. They're no longer reacting, they're now responding. Okay. So in removing the triggers, you begin a series of events in the mind that allows them to break free from the concept of thoughts. So if you take a circle of your life as thoughts, okay, and it's a solid circle and you're living in the matrix, you're not awake, you're living by your five senses, and everything you've gone through is the proof of your identity. You're not going to be able to be aware of what's between thought because your whole life is surrounded in thought. Okay, that's the egoic memory loop of living in a realm of thought. Now, let's say I have an epiphany. Maybe I go through a dark night of the soul. Something is tragic in my life, and that breaks the thought. It breaks the conclusion of what you thought your life was up until that point. So what happens is now you have a little opening in this circle. And remember, you're walking through seasons. So, you now wait until that season comes back around to become aware again. This is why we're asleep, we're awake, we're asleep. We fade in and out based on the breaks in between thought. Okay. And so eventually we keep having epiphanies until our circle of thought lines now becomes a constellation, kind of like stars in a circle. Okay. And now what we have is enough breaks in between thought that we can become conscious. And so that's kind of the process of going from 3D to 5D is taking no thought for your life and not living off of the thought realm, but living from the knowing realm. And this is why faith moves from thoughts. But when you come to the end of your faith, the salvation of your soul, which is what Peter says, you enter into faith being the substance of things hoped for. In other words, you realize that the faith you were pursuing, you already were, and you begin to meet yourself, and that becomes the embrace of reconciliation at the deeper levels of our perception that allows us to transcend time and space and begin to do things like Enoch did, and
Right.
and you remember, he just wasn't taken. He showed up in multiple timelines and prophesied about it in the book of Jude. So we know that he was ascending and descending, and he was present whether anybody saw him or not.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I want to get to just two different comments in the chat room,
Okay.
and then move on to a little more about defining the 5D and 3D, maybe even 7D, and so on. And I have some comments here that I got from you, Dr. Wayne Powell. Which I've known this guy quite a while. He says, how do you reconcile that we're living in the past as a physical observations, as all physical observations are observed fractionally later than they actually occurred?
Okay. So say that again in short. How do we reconcile that we don't have a past or do have a
How
past?
do we reconcile that we're living in the past as the physical observations are observed fractionally later than they actually occurred?
Oh, okay. Well, that's the hypnotism of linear time. And so just like you have the lamb slain from before the foundation of the world, and then you have the lamb slain in time. Okay. The lamb slain from the foundation of the world is where it was all finished. Jesus coming is an echo in which we are catching up with that which is complete. And so
Mhm.
we many a times, okay, before you call, I will answer. That's what it says in the Old Testament. So we're calling out and God's answering. But then we look back and we realize through hindsight, oh, wait a second here. The only reason I called is because I remember he answered. So now we're flipping it over. And so this is a mystery, very hard to put into lower frequency verbal communication, since that is really not the language we possess. That is a not even finite, it's beyond finite language. But we are experiencing an echo at one level in the 3D. And again, this is based on our level of consciousness. And so at one side in our journey, and I think we're journeying through this at levels in our awareness, is that we start out only living our past. In fact, our mind moves by association of where it's been, not where it's at. So anytime we come up with a response and a reaction, it's based on a previous response and a reaction. And that's called a memory loop, right? We're caught in a memory loop. And so when we start to redeem the time is where we begin to come out of trauma of the past. So the only reason we're stuck in an echo of the past is because of conclusions that are not based in reality, but based in duality, okay? And so we then set that as something we're continually living as a past when we've actually never had a past. Even the term "in the beginning was the heavens and the earth," that term "beginning" has nothing to do with the beginning of time. It has nothing to do with even a starting place. It has to do with consciousness, okay? It has to do with becoming conscious of, or I could say it this way in kind of a reduced way, because there's no way to say it, is that God became aware of himself, okay? So God becoming aware of himself, self-awareness, and we know it as humans, at a certain age, children are not self-aware. But then they come to a certain age, especially when they start hitting teenager, that they become very self-aware and they tend to withdraw, right? They tend to take things personally. And so there's a place of the childlike wonder of God's design, and there's the place where visible manifestation and timelines became a level of self-awareness, okay? And so, and of course, God didn't pull away as teenagers would, but that's the concept. And so the only past you have is the past of your conclusion, which, and I'm not going to negate your history because there is legacy in your history, okay? But and that's a level. But if you can imagine, you are stewarding multiple levels of consciousness that are all wired according to the game, the scripts, that are allowing us to wake up. So without the 3D, we would not be able to wake up to the 5D, but the 5D was always engaging, helping the 3D to cross over. And so there isn't really this, and I love the picture of the 5D sacred geometry that you put up there, because that is actually your life. So we could look at, and I'll give this example. A trigger is a lie you've believed based in a past memory, okay? While a glimmer is an eternal memory of who you've always been that's now echoing into your present realization. And so duality aids us in reconciliation. I know that seems contradictory because when we're looking through duality, we're seeing an illusion. We're seeing something that's twisted. And it begins a battle on the inside of us of good or evil. But in the 5D, duality is polarity. It is the positive and negative charges that are useful, because if you didn't have positive and negative charges in your body, your blood would not circulate through your body, okay? And so even though that body is manifesting as biology, it is actually positive and negative frequencies in the midst of energy that's displaying itself in the current paradigm that you have concluded on based on having a past. And so it is a mystery. We don't fully obviously understand this. All we can do is grasp at words to try to describe some of these ethereal and eternal encounters that are making their imprint in the timeline experience of ourselves, and now pulling us out of that and into more of a heavenly perspective of what life really is. And so like Genesis, like when you read Genesis, we tend to look at it as, well, God made trees and he made oceans and this was all a physical world, but it was really what was going on within that was unveiling all creation in you. That's why it's groaning to manifest you, because it's actually within you, not outside of you. I don't know if I even answered this guy's question, but that was great. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, and for me, I've interpreted Genesis chapter
Yes,
1 from the Hebrew, I viewed it as God's explanation of what took place in eternity
yes,
past, as opposed to we get so hung up on the literalness of Scripture that while there is a literalness and there's a historical version, still there is something much deeper. You can be limited to your 2D and 3D
yeah,
perspective of how you see God, how you see God's explanation. Even when I read the scriptures and I define them from Tiffany Addison's making a lot of great comments on here. I wish I had time to
yeah,
go
sure.
through all of them. Um, but even when you are seeing the Old Testament, for example, I look in the Hebrew and we kind of break down and figure out what exactly were they trying to write as laying aside our English translation of Scripture that is really we need it.
Yeah.
It's a starting place, but it's confused a lot of people about who God is and about who they are. But even when I go to the Hebrew or the Greek language or the Aramaic, I still have a question. And my question is that going to be the limit of what I'm seeing just in what someone intended to write down that they think or believe God said?
Yes.
Or was there an intention beyond the writer and what was God actually the message he was trying to get to his creation? So, in light of that, you made a statement as the infinite visible God embraces himself as pure power and energy, he recycles into the form of thoughts that is known as your life.
Yeah.
This part of the dream, we must remain asleep. Now, you'll have to explain this to everybody, but
Okay.
this part of the dream, we must remain asleep in order for love to have expression. At every dimension we are upgrading into is also a dream.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? What are you saying in that?
Well, we got to get past the definition of dreaming. Okay. Our dream is we lay in our bed, we go to sleep, we dream. We don't take our
Right?
dreams literally. We do when we're in them until we wake up and we realize it was a dream. Okay. So there is a connection there, but not an exact definition because God never sleeps nor slumbers. Okay.
Right?
But yet Psalm says he will awake as a man out of sleep, as a man drunk with wine. And so we are waking out of the drunkenness of being desensitized by the time, space, and matter. So we are waking up from that on our side. But God is going to sleep in that to manifest it. Now, the slumber of God is not God sleeping like he's unconscious. It's actually self-awareness. It's God looking within himself. So everything God says about the kingdom is within you, go within, all of that. He himself has to do the same. He's giving you his own experience. Okay. And so when he goes within, he sees what? He sees himself in the form of every possible interaction of himself with himself, which is you. Okay. That's the Elohim, the many as the one, the I am. Okay. And and so, when you're dealing with the dream world, I think I shared this last week, I'm not sure, but the Genesis story where God had a dream of a human experience. And in the dream, he was Adam. But Adam there is still the singularity. Okay. And it's not ADAM, it's ATOM. Okay. And so, and we can see the whole side of Eve being the neuron, Adam being the atom, and we can see that from a quantum perspective. But to go a little bit more into the dream state, if you were to look within the garden of your own mind as God did his, and you wanted to manifest invisibility, Adam and Eve were not visible at that time that it says it in scripture anyway. And there's a lot of allegory there. In fact, you'll find after he rested, there was no one to till the garden. So it's again showing that this wasn't about time, space, or matter. This was about that which was going on inside the mind of God. And so we have the mind of God, we have Adam, and it says Adam was made or created. And again, when we think of creating something, we get an idea nobody's had, we invent it, it's never been, and we make something out of nothing. But God really doesn't make something out of nothing because he is all things already. And so he simply pulls a part of himself into another view of himself or another unveiling of himself, and whatever that looks like. I mean, all creation declares his glory. And so everything is the revelation of him, hidden under the dualistic view, hidden under the memory conclusion, and all of that. And so that word made or create means to fatten, squeeze out, ordain, begotten, manifest. So it's simply that which is manifesting in another way. And so we see that with Adam. But what we do see with Eve, when he puts them to sleep, is Eve is formed. Eve is not made, but formed. Again, Eve is not manifested of that which is in another view, or Adam is. Eve is not manifested that which is in another view. It becomes more of the system of formation for what that which is can walk upon at multiple levels. And so Eve represents, of course, we have Adam and Eve, the masculinity, the femininity, okay? Both sides of the brain, we have the masculine and feminine attributes of God that are one, right? But we are experiencing it in a dualistic way. And when you deal with the infinite and the invisible, you're dealing with the masculinity, the giver of all things. When you're dealing with the feminine, you're dealing with the receiver. But yet it's God receiving from himself the embrace of himself in an expression of himself in that which could not be expressed otherwise. And so the divine feminine is the visible manifestation of God's system of creation that allows the interaction of himself with himself at every possible level, known as beings. And of course, these beings are going to be experienced from without, from within. And so this is where we really break free from the concept of being attacked and being weary of spirits. Or, well, how do you know that's from the Father? You might want to test the spirits. Well, the only thing I need to test of a spirit is the intention of the spirit of my mind, which is to be renewed in the spirit of my mind.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me, I want to see so multidimensional when I'm looking at things in the spirit, when I'm seeing who God is and who he's reflecting back, that I am. I'm a person who my goal is to see in limitless dimensions of truth. Now, I agree with you that Adam and Eve per se were not in the visible or the appearance realm as we're experiencing at this moment in time. They were in an invisible realm status. I teach that Eve is the conscious mind of the man, but at the same time,
and it goes
there's
along
a
with
lot
that
to that story.
at another level. It really does, because that is the consciousness of God, is visibility. So yeah.
So here's a couple of more statements, because I want to get as many of these in as we can, because I know we'll be limited
I'll do
next
my
week.
best.
But this is something from you. Our 5D self is dreaming of a 3D world, and then you went beyond that and said our 7D self is dreaming of a 5D experience. Would you lay that out just a little bit?
All right. So basically, all these different dimensions are hidden within your DNA, but your DNA is not biological. Its only experience is biological. It's actually vibrational, or as we would call it, Jacob's ladder. We can also connect the small version of the DNA as also your spine up to your brain, base of your brain, which is where you have your sacrum, which is sacred, and you actually have the whole story of Christ hidden within your spine and your nerves, and also within the chakras. So there's multiple ways to see this Jacob's ladder, but Jacob's ladder is where you continue to ascend. Now, you're not going anywhere. You are the very things you're about to meet. You are just becoming aware of it. And so just like when you walk through a situation in life that you can't understand, you try to understand it, you're frustrated, you're in confusion, you're stressed out. Maybe it was a negative situation at the time. And then as time goes by, you look back and you all of a sudden get an epiphany that it wasn't negative at all. It was actually, had you not walked through that, you wouldn't be experiencing, the blessing and the happiness that you're having now. And you get what's called hindsight, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You leveled up in your consciousness of what you had been through. On a higher level is how this operates in a multidimensional state, but it's a lot more extreme because your entire reality has to be shattered in order for you to ascend. Your entire reality has to be shattered. There has to be what's called the ego disillusionment, or the ego death, as some would call it, in order to rip the veil and cross over out of limited perspective and view. And that can happen in multiple ways, whether it's through prayer, through meditation, breathing exercise. I mean, we do all these different things to ascend, and I do believe it is connected also with the pineal gland and the third eye and some of these other aspects at a biological level. But
Right.
again, that's not even biology. That's just how we're experiencing it. We're experiencing vibration. There's nothing more. If you were to look and see with your 3D eyes into God, like as best you could, you would see a void of nothingness. And in that void would be all things. And so you are actually nothing at the level of 3D. You are vibration of allness that's being harnessed by polarity, that's being misunderstood as duality. And so we're in this echo, and that's the dream state of God. And so God is not really dreaming, as in he's asleep. He is gazing in an awareness at every possible level, because remember, divinity isn't just all knowingness, must know everything it knows. And
Yeah.
all knowingness to know everything it knows and to bear witness of the data of all knowingness is going to set up a system to see it at multiple levels. And so we are dreaming that we're God, and God is dreaming that he is us. But in his dream of being us, he chose to pretend he wasn't God. and
Yeah,
so
that's heavy.
because being God is an infinite void without being able to connect to itself without the visible. And this is why the visible didn't come into being. The visible has always been hidden within being, God. And so again, there was no separation of this. We're experiencing it as an echo through our 3D perspective, in which the Bible has a lot of 5D in it, but it's hidden underneath a 3D literal.
That's right. That's right. That's right, because we're not just looking at the pages of what's written in on the pages in black and white. We're looking at that which is in between the lines of text, which is called the interlinear. That's actually the definition, that which is in between the lines of text. Now, I agree. Here's the thing: God perceives himself as mankind, because mankind has had a hard time perceiving himself as God. So God's showing us a picture that's easier for us to grab hold of, and the more we grab hold of that picture, the deeper the deeper we get kind of sucked into the wormhole here. We're beginning to see more and more. You mentioned the renewed in the spirit of your mind. Let me just share this right quickly. Ephesians 4 verse 23 in the Amplified, and that'll be on the screen there in Facebook. It says, "And be continually renewed in the spirit of your mind, having a fresh, untarnished mental and spiritual attitude." It goes on in the Passion Translation saying, "And now it's time to be made new by every revelation that's been given to you." Now, here's the thing. We are who we are. We're who we've been created as. And many times, Apostle, we don't see that. Okay, what God says we are, who He created us as, we don't see that, and so we live by revelation. From the Scripture says, from glory to glory. I also interject that we're transformed in the mind of our flesh. The word flesh, sarx, in the Greek is that which is without divine influence. That very well may be the concept of the unrenewed mind, but who we are, spirit, soul, and body, has divine influence. influence, we're intertwangled or intermingled with divine influence, so we become the divine influence to that which is unrenewed at this moment in time.
Yeah.
And so we don't only be transformed in that mind of flesh from glory to glory, but it's from experience to experience. It's from revelation to revelation, and so on. So we live by every revelation that's been given to us, and that revelation makes us new or refreshes us. I wish there was an RE word in there, pointing back to origin, but it points us back to the truth of who we are. And so I love that. Now, real we're getting at the top of the hour, which is fine. But here's the thing: Tiffany Addison says there are, and I want you to deal with this one. There are 33 vertebrae, so there must be 33 realms within us. What about that?
I agree. And Jesus died at 33. So we also have all of that as well. And so the gospel is hidden within the 33 vertebrae and 33 realms. I definitely could agree. I think the Masons, I don't remember what their height of was, but it was in the 30s there as well when it comes to masonry. So there's a lot, and a lot of this stuff is very ancient. Some of the earlier understandings of religions and spirituality, even thousands of years before the Old Testament and the Jews, and so there's a lot in the some of the ancient Egyptian and Mayan beliefs. I mean, if you go back to for instance Africa and their earliest spiritual beliefs, do you know what their earliest spiritual beliefs were? And their stuff is recorded and is recorded way before the Bible. Their belief is you are a frequency, you are a spirit. This was the original stuff as far back as recorded. There is no sin, and basically you're one with everything. And that was the original revelation that turned into all of the cultural stuff that we're having to kind of wade through to get back to that original, which we are coming back into it. So we are coming full circle. And again, I'm not saying that I'm not necessarily a believer of all these texts as in following a religion, but it is interesting to see that everybody has been saying the same thing in one way or another throughout the generations, and it's either hidden under culture or under a 3D perspective. But yeah, I haven't studied a lot on the 33 vertebrae, except for the fact that there is a connection there with frequency, with memory, with chakras, with the story of Christ, and definitely with dimensions. And so, so that's definitely a big one. One thing I'd like to say that will help people also to understand they're in a dream, and I actually was wondering about this myself until recently when this revelation became clear, was a lot of times when I get up and I flow, when we do our glory gatherings or we do videos, I'll have a lot of people say to me, my mind is blown. I can't think. And they're like swirling, like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm in a dream. And they'll feel this surreal feeling as revelation that that is above where they can think, supersedes their ability to figure it out. And they have some sort of, experience. They become aware of something that they witness to as true, but can't comprehend what they know to be true. Okay. And I think all of us had that. And what do we feel? This surreal moment, like we're trying to hold on to what's real. Well, that reaction from revelation is revealing to you you're in a dream. Now, the part of the dream, and I didn't finish this, the part of the dream you wake up from is that the dream you're in is your only life. That's the part you wake up from. So you wake up from the sensual realm as being your only way to discern life. You wake up from being just matter in time and space. Okay. But you stay within the dream to visibly engage. So remember, visibility is different than physical. Okay. For instance, there's still a level of biological motion in ultimate 5D. Now we're alive here. We're combining 5D and 3D. So it's not about leaving one dimension. It's about once we graduate from one and we move in the other, once we master that one, we connect it to the other and we begin to biologically glorify in spiritual momentum, in vibration. So again, this is the
Mhm.
connecting of all of them, not the doing away with any of them. It's just doing away with the negative sides, or shall I say, the twisted image of. And so, you know, each level of the dream, you begin to move up. So there still is a level of biological in 5D until it's mastered, and then you can basically create any biology you want in any form and morph it. But you're like Jesus, a glorified body. Okay, at that point of mastering the 5D, you know, and so there is no upkeep after you've mastered the 5D. But like 6D, 7D, there's still levels of biology. But by the time you get to 9D, you are simply a light being. You are simply pure light, but you still have form. And it's very much like Neo in the Matrix. I think it was the third one when they're going to Machine City and him and Trinity are flying and he gets blinded by Mr. Smith. And he's wearing that blindfold, but everything he sees is light. Okay, that's 9D. Okay, you're still manifesting. It's still tangible, but it is not the substance that you knew as biological in 3D. And that's where you'll see a lot of archangels, angels, the angelic realm of what we have depicted as angels, which is a lot deeper than even what is recorded biblically through 3D lenses. And so a lot of those angelic beings, now we are all of that, echoing. So if you can imagine, we are God echoing into a human experience that is now looking back at itself and embracing itself on all levels. And so that to me also lines up with the vertebrae. So we are the echo of that vertebrae and entering into the sacrum, the sacred place that breaks open the single eye, right? And so I watched this one video where if you were to look at kind of like the hourglass view in space of a frequency field, kind of funneling up at one end, narrow in the middle, and funneling down. And we're in the middle of that as a singularity, and we're suspended inside a black hole and a white hole, which there are both, okay? And really there is no planets, but simply the projection of a singularity in between a black hole and a white hole. And so it makes a lot of sense to look at these things. And again, even with science, even with astronomy, even with all of this, we're still seeing a parable of the true. So no matter what dimension you ascend into within dimensions, they still have measurements. A dimension is a measurement, and a measurement is not infinite. So it's finite. And the finite means to move and change expression, while the infinite means going on forever in a paused state. Okay, so it's the sameness of nature, but with the constant change of expression. And that's where you get the infinite, infinite.
Yeah, I really appreciate this because I understand, so all of the dreams, and for me, generally a vision when I was younger was just a vision. I just saw something. But the older I've got, the more I've understood some things. I have had what I call interactive visions, and I want to tell you that if I remember right, every one of those visions, my physical eyes were closed. Yet I saw clearly.
Sure.
And I remember when the portal opened up, and Jesus, his hand came out and pulled me into a kneeling position, and all this stuff going on. I remember that, and the only thing in that vision I didn't hear was voice, but it was no voice, but yet it was a knowing. I heard, but I didn't
That's
hear,
actually a higher
and so
dimension than a voice.
exactly. And so this is what we need to attain to without attaining.
Yep.
Attain to without attaining, without striving. I want to close with this just real quickly. We talked about the 33 vertebrae. We talked about 33 levels of consciousness. Yes, the masonry, their highest level was 33, the Masons. But the thing about Jesus, 33 and a half years, the 33 in his life when he completed his time in the appearance realm. Remember this, 33 and a half. The book of Revelation talks about the 33 and a half, or the 3.5, but also 33 and a half is an incomplete number.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else do you see in the book of Revelation? You see the second 33 and a half. That makes the number complete. 7 is a complete number.
Right.
I want to tell you something. This is a picture of eternity past, before time began, showing that you are the completion of everything that God did. 33 and 30. Having 33 and a half, 7, complete number, and you're the completion of everything that he began. So there's more, folks. There's more, and we're headed to some good stuff, aren't we, Apostle?
Oh man, I'm enjoying this, Bishop. I am enjoying it. Yeah, I'm really excited. Maybe next week we could talk about how to implement this and how this affects our everyday life and what's the fruit of it, because that way people don't feel like they're striving to get somewhere, and how is the posture entering into this? So maybe we could go into that. That would be wonderful.
Yes, we can go anywhere you want to, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Listen, everybody, this is my last broadcast for the week. I hope you've enjoyed all 4 of these shows, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I'll be back next week on Tuesday with our panel discussion and so on. So we love and appreciate you. I want you to please, if you would, click like and then click share. Let other people know about this broadcast. This has been so good. Put it on your timeline. Put it on your group pages, wherever that you can, and I know that it will be a blessing to people. Also, remember, we are listener supported. If you'd like to send support, I'll post some links here shortly. Another thing I like to say, and I know this is kind of double tagging everything, but Apostle Brian's ministry, you can find them at give them that website if you would, please.
Yeah, it's at foggm, FOGGM.org, and I will put it in the comments.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
and you can be a support to their ministry and their family. They're full time in the ministry, and it would be a blessing for you to support them. So anyway, have a wonderful day, and he'll put that there in the comments, and I'll post some information here shortly. We love you all. Thank you so much for joining us and be a part of this broadcast. We'll see you soon. Bye bye, everyone.